Nearly 100 years ago, there was a landmark trial between religious fundamentalism and the current educational system. And Jonathan's going to tell us a little bit more about it. You want to take it away, Jonathan?
Sure. This article explains in some detail the events of the Scopes trial in Tennessee 99 years ago. This trial started a still raging debate about how creationism and intelligent design versus science is to be taught in schools. Though Scopes lost the case, eventually science won, but maybe not. New movements in the U.S. and abroad have been working to invade school boards, and some states are battling in the courts to defend draconian laws that limit what can be taught in schools and state universities. Once again, religious zealots and fanatics are invading the schools. Let's explore what Scopes has to say about this and how the case was started as a gift to one of the a pastor, religious representative in their state assembly as a gift to his ineffectiveness. The story is from the Los Angeles Times by Michael Hiltzik, and I apologize for that, on July 26, 2024. So I would like pass this to the Phoebe.
The Phoebe?
I'm Phoebe.
The Phoebe.
You
Phoebe.
are the
Phoebe.
Yes.
Can I get a bill passed, please?
Yeah, sure.
Can I get some legislation, please? I want
just email Congress, and I'm sure they'll get right on it.
One of them. That's a nice gift, that is. Don't find that under the Christmas tree or as a birthday present very often, do you? Here, have some legislation. Go on, have some legislation. How wonderful. Have legislation. It's nice for you. But legislation is not a gift. Legislation is not something to be fart-arsed around with. And if you're that bad at getting legislation passed, maybe stop being a legislator. I think that's the fundamental problem here. It's like, you're a governor of a state. You're bad at governing. Stop being a governor. It's that kind of ludicrousness here. And bad legislation means bad laws, means injustice and ridicule of the legal system. You get bad laws on the books and you get ridicule from the public and you have no faith in the institution. The Supreme Court's doing that nicely for itself. It's creating bad laws out of whole cloth. Whole cloth bad laws that are ridiculing the institution from top to bottom. And symbols matter a lot. Symbols matter a lot. There is nothing symbolic or empty when it comes to legislating. Tell people who were fighting the gay rights movement in the 50s, 60s, and 70s about symbols. Tell people in Britain who were repealing the last of the anti-gay laws on the books in 2021 with the Merchant Shipping Repeal Act, because it was still sitting on the books. And as we have seen in states like Arizona with abortion laws that are purely symbolic, from the 1800s. They're not symbolic when someone decides that that's the law today that they're going to enforce. And this is the dangerous thing. The law is only there as something of meaning when somebody chooses to enforce it. And the judge in this case chose to enforce the law. Chose to enforce the law wrong, may I add, but he chose to enforce the law. The judge exceeded his sentencing powers here and over-sentenced, and on a technicality, it was struck down. I privately think the judge did that deliberately to prevent a genuine appeal going forward, because if you have a genuine appeal going forward, then it can be taken up by the court on substantive grounds, whereas if a judge is just an idiot, it can't go any further. But this is an issue as old as time. You don't need any qualifications other than you're liked by the electorate to become an elected official. And that is an electorate problem as old as democracy has been in existence, because it has allowed people who have no rhyme or reason from the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 20th century, 21st century, be anywhere near legislating.
Within the last couple of years, I read a book actually on the history of the fight to keep creationism and later intelligent design out of the schools. And this really is a battle that has never, ever, ever stopped. Right after the Scopes trial, both Alabama and Missouri had long legal battles fought over it. It is an actual pretty interesting history where the courts have, since the Scopes trial, have continuously sided divided against creationism and IDs in recent decades. And as I recall, and I could be wrong about this, but I think Missouri fought a long legal battle and eventually lost in the courts. And Alabama eventually just quietly dropped the law from the state books without trying to test it in the courts. So, I mean, this is something that has happened in more places throughout the United States. And as I said, it's a big, long, ongoing battle. We all know about the intelligent design case that happened in Massachusetts in the 1990s, I think. So, but John, I know you found a telling quote in this article. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it actually comes from Ray Ginger's book about the case 6 Days or Forever. And it said, the legislature passed the measure idly as a meaningless gift to its drafter, John W. Butler, a lay preacher who hadn't passed any other bill. The bill did not amount to a row of pins. Let him have it, a legislator is alleged to have said. And so this was passed as, poor guy isn't a very good legislator. Let's at least give him one little, throw the dog a bone, but even if you throw a bone to a hungry dog, has unseen consequences. So in this case, elevating ridiculous law into a culture war.
Greedy.
No one expected the governor to sign this, but he did. So it made law. So it's like teach, and the law reads. And I'll quote that, to teach any theory that denies the story of divine creation of man as taught in the Bible, and to teach instead that man had descended from a lower order of animal, in a word, evolution, was made a misdemeanor with a fine. So if you do that, you're going to get arrested and fined. That's what the law he broke was.
That's where the judge fell down, because he exceeded his fine power. He wasn't allowed to impose the fine that he had. And the problem here is the media got hold of it. Modern media got hold of it. And modern media blew it all out of proportions. I mean, modern media made it far more ridiculous than it actually was. I mean,
that's part of that was William Jennings Bryan, though, wasn't it? I mean, he was making a big deal out of it and bringing the media in and creating that.
No. I mean, like modern film adaptations, which are just rubbish, which have no bearing on actual reality in court. Sensationalizing things left, right, and center. I mean, take the mini-series People versus O.J. Simpson. Yeah, some of it was accurate, but large chunks of it were inaccurate and for media consumption. I mean, the films made about the trial, some parts of it are accurate, large parts of it are imagined and complete nonsense. But that's what the media does, and that's the problem when you have media consumption portrayed as truth. And in this case, the media consumption is being portrayed as the truth of the trial. The town was fanatics. This man was a lunatic. This man was a pariah. Blah, 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 blah. Absolute codswallop. Absolute codswallop from start to finish. And I mean, it's just frustrating that there was a reliance on tertiary sources for history moving forwards in the society that we live in, especially when it comes to movies made specifically to make money and not to be educationally accurate.
Well, in the 1960s film version, it says in the article, it starred Frederick March, Spencer Tracy, and Gene Kelly. Spencer Tracy and Gene Kelly were very famous actors at the time. So it was like, they're going to portray them. The characters meant to play Brian, Clarence Darrow, and H.L. Mencken, who was the Baltimore newspaperman who
brilliantly
did all the news
trial
coverage for it. So it's like, and he was an aggressive journalist, which is fine, but when you kind of overshoot things a little bit, it's kind of a mess.
I think there was a general, from both sides, there was generally putting too much into the trial than was really there. I mean, really, it was just a small local thing that really it didn't affect the whole state at the time. It didn't affect the whole country at the time when the trial was over. But the big media sensation that happened over it did, and it really brought this fight over creationism into the public eye. So Scopes was actually recruited by a group of men that hung out at the local local pharmacy, including the pharmacist and a local lawyer. And they thought the law was wrong. It was. And they wanted to take it to court. So they recruited scopes to come and help them do it. Now, John, I know you studied the town about a little bit and the people that were there. Can you tell us a little bit about the place where the trial took place at? Was it really religious there?
No, it was just a typical smallish town that had, this was just a violation of a misdemeanor law, kind of like, okay. No, it wasn't really very exciting, except for to the locals. The locals really didn't care. They were basically bored with it.
I think
so.
The way
they
that
then
I
found that it was going to be really good for them financially, because the circus that was being created by the press brought people to town and brought press to town and increased their revenues for that year. So that was about their only real interest in it. And the pro-science, it was a bad test case. Because it was dying of apathy in the town. But, it was like true religious, they've continually fought this since then, but they were fighting it before then too. There were other incidences that didn't make it to court about, not in this particular town, but, they say there's a good 150 years of the science versus creation war since Darwin, so it is, but the townsfolk themselves were, typical Americans. Hey, we can make money at this, so let's do that. But Scopes himself was one of the adherents of the science side of things, and he said that Dayton trial marked the beginning of the decline of fundamentalism. Oh, I wish that were true. He said that in a 1965 interview, "I feel that restrictive legislation on academic freedom is forever a thing of the past." That was not a very good prophecy. It's not very prophetic at all. So that was one of the things that I wanted to mention. Another paragraph in the article said that for the evangelical right, Gould noted, creationism is a mere stalking horse in a political program that would ban abortion, erase political and social gains of women, and reinstitute all the jingoism and distrust of learning that prepares a nation for demagoguery. So that's kind of, what's happening. And now that had predictive power if you're looking at today. The whole thing was just a test of bad ideas and to see if they could build on it and convince the public to acquiesce to authoritarian rule. Again, had predictive power. So
I mentioned Missouri and Alabama as some of the battleground states, but Phoebe, you had mentioned Kansas too. Can you fill us in on that?
In 1999, the Kansas School Board decided that they were going to remove the teaching of evolution from the state curriculum. They weren't going to replace it with anything. They were just going to just remove it. Goodbye. Get rid of that. We don't need to teach that. Science in the classroom? Nah, we don't bother with that. And it was the dying days of the 20th century. And it was trying to make it out like it was the first days of the 20th century in this fit of millennium bug-fearing, tomorrow's world isn't going to come for me kind of nonsense, where they basically said, we want our children to be ignorant. We want our children to retain ignorance. And we don't particularly like, this modern rubbish that's here, there, and everywhere. So we're just going to get rid of it. And this was picked up on by a number of science journals at the time as absolute madness, because it's scientifically illiterate, and it creates scientific illiteracy amongst people in school, because it has you eliminate a fundamental bridge to understanding a number of things. As if you can just go, it's magic, and then it's there. Well, what are you going to do? It's magic. It's magic. There you go. Next. And I mean, they say that in life there is no magic, but the only thing that is magic is legislation and contracts, because you can just create something and then that's it. It's all changed. That's the only magic there is. And we see it here when they try to legislate actual woo-woo magic, la-da-da-di-da, out of their own heads, where they can just go, well, okay, we're going to jump from A to Z and we're going to miss out the 24 letters in the middle because, it's just too complicated and I can't be doing with it and my critical thinking thinking skills and my cognitive dissonance is too much, and I'm going to just explode and fall over. I mean, we live in a world of pluralism. We don't live in a world of monoism or, restricted ideas. And the attempts by a narrow fundamental sect that is Christianity in this context to try and force on every other person, not just their own sect, so Buddhists, atheists, Jews, Hindus, agnostics, etc., to adhere that intelligent design came along and created things is prima facie unconstitutional guff and crowbarring religion through the Overton window like you're trying to race the America's Cup through it. It is a nonsense.
I think we're seeing a big push too. And you were talking about, at the turn of the century, that anti-intellectualism, anti-science wave that was sweeping across the country. And I still think we're still dealing with that today. We're dealing with 20 years of people denying science. We're dealing with people still denying it today, getting even worse at it at some points. Do you think that we're ever going to get out of this battle?
Yes, when that generation dies.
But Scope's generation died, and we're still in that battle. It's not a generational question, is it?
I understand that. It is a generational question because we're seeing more and more people are no longer only getting their education from school. Peer education, the internet, access to wider resources than just what is given to you by your parents and by your school is the fundamental thing of Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and soon to be Generation Beta when it does actually turn up in full force, because information will destroy and education will eliminate.
But
yes, conspiracy theories and all that exist on social media and all that, but people like us, and there are a lot of people like us, and as was seen in Britain when it came to the media nonsense surrounding rioting in the streets and far-right lunatics taking over, when you actually get onto the ground and see the reality in my former home city of Brighton and Hove, where 4,000 anti-fascist protesters turned up to 50 fascist protesters in the streets, you realize that reality is not what's on social media. People do educate themselves, and the education system that was the only thing that people used to get any information from is no longer that exclusive source.
I just look at, you say people can go to the internet and look, and I see other things on there too, like Ken Ham and Kent Hovind, right? And there are people still looking at AIG. So that's why I say I don't know that it's a generational thing, because this information is still being perpetuated. I talk to younger people online all the time that are pushing this creationism, they're pushing intelligent design, and I don't know that we're getting away from
doing it online. When did you actually go and speak to people in reality offline who have actually gone to a real world that is not the internet?
Phoebe, where I live, I am surrounded by these people. Where I live, I talk to these people every day. They come into these anti-science people come into my store all the time. I'm not just seeing these people on the internet. I'm seeing a lot of young people on the internet. That's kind of what scares me. But I have people walking into my store every day with these type of attitudes.
And I think that is actually a shrinking percentage of the population. It's just a more voluble and noticeable, because people see the internet as they think that everybody deserves to hear their opinion on something. It doesn't necessarily mean that their opinion is more representative. It just means that they're more licensed to give a total stranger their opinion, because that's what social media has done. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily mean that people have a greater level of actually believing this. It's just that more people who are energized by this, as my mother says, the people who shout loudest should be ignored first.
Well, the subtext, too, of this is that there is a large organized right-wing effort to turn the U.S. into a theocratic dictatorship. Creationism, anti-LGBT, flat earth, anti-trans, anti-woke rhetoric is a way of normalizing anti-democratic and anti-republican values. And I say that because we're not a democracy, we are a republic, but values on which this country was founded. And of course, all the politicians side with the perceived winning team, right? And that's why the extremist right has had all the normal conservatives signed on to gain power, as they had, and because they do have an ever shrinking adherence to their particular beliefs. So they are in the death throes of their philosophy and their approach to life. I agree with you there, Phoebe. And I think that is spurring a lot of the issues that we're having today are made issues because there's a group of very privileged people who are starting to fear losing their privilege.
Well, this is great conversation, and I really like to hear what some of our viewers think about it. So leave a comment or drop us an email at nonprofits@atheist-community.org. And if you'd like to watch some more of the nonprofits, you can just click right here.